Welcome. How are you, sir? Whoops, that was interesting. Little flash in front. Oh, that was the paperwork.
This paper, sorry.
No, that's okay. It was just an interesting little, looked like a bird flying by for a moment. So welcome, Russell Urban-Mead. Is that how you pronounce it?
Correct.
Or RUM? I love the acronym, by the way. Has that always been your acronym since you were a little kid?
No, because I didn't become Urban-Mead until I was married.
Oh, is that right? How eclectic of you and your wife. That's so excellent. That is so good. I didn't know, many people have the double name when they're, they're the
Our
kids
children
of.
do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. So, oh, fantastic. That's very nice. I'll have to tell my wife that one. She just kept her last name. That was definitely part of the condition. So well, welcome, Russell Urban-Mead. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
If you would, tell us who you are, where do you live, what kind of work you do, sir.
I live in Hyde Park. Um, I We moved to the Hudson Valley, my wife and I, in 1987. Um, and We, in fact, moved up here to work on an apple orchard. And after several months of that, we realized it was a pretty nice place, and so settled in, and both ended up going to grad school at different times. Um, I work as a hydrogeologist at the Chazen Companies. Our parent office is in Poughkeepsie, but we have several other offices. So I now, uh, until the pandemic, I was regularly visiting all of our offices. Um, the kind of work I do as a hydrogeologist is primarily water supply, water development work, water resource planning work. I will contribute to contaminant studies, but I have colleagues who do that more readily than I do. So we divvy up the work a little bit. And I've been at the Chazen Companies now long enough that I've taken on a good number of administrative duties. So I'm the vice president for environmental services. So we have ecologists and wetland specialists and land use professionals who do environmental site assessments for property transactions and brownfields project work. So we have a diverse number of things that the environmental services group does at the Chazen Companies, and I have some oversight responsibility for all of that. But in my heart, I'm a hydrogeologist, and water supply and water resource work is what makes me smile.
Fantastic. So we like to start with why. Why did you move to clean energy?
Well, I was the kid who ordered Frostline kits and sewed my own camping gear when I was in high school. I pored over the catalogs that told you how you could have an energy efficient home with, car batteries in the basement and DC current running through your walls. And I knew I never wanted that, but I was fascinated with the idea of energy efficiency. So that goes back a long way for me. Um, and I'm also uh, in pompous words, I'm a fiscal conservative. I love saving. I live conservatively, and I like saving energy, and I like smart investments in energy, and the concept of being uh, and I care an awful lot for the environment. My career is the environment. I do water resource work and planning work, and ecologists work with me, and it's what I love. So the idea of conserving energy and developing it locally and having a sustainable source of energy has been close to my heart for a long time. We put our first photovoltaic system in about 2005, um, and have taken many steps since then. I was delighted when LEDs came in and swapped the whole house to LED electricals. I was a little uneasy with the CFLs, but did that for a while. Um, and so, yeah, it makes sense to me. I love I love the. I also like technology. I'm the kind of kid who liked braces when I had to have them as an adolescent because it was cool technology. Excuse me, just a sec. Yeah, and the shower pan. Oh, okay, the one that's going out could be broken out. Thank you very much. Yep, I'm sorry, Ron.
No, Russ, no worries, Russell.
I'm assuming you can cut that.
Yes, indeed, exactly. So
Um,
let's go back to the about your house. How old is it, and then what did you do? Because you started going into some of the what's. So why don't we just head right to there?
so it's a 1790s farmhouse. Um, it was a tenant farm in support of what is today Mills Mansion. It was an upland farm, and this is the old farmhouse, and has all of the complications and amazing things that come with a very old structure. And so we've really enjoyed that. You know, when you buy a 1790s home farmhouse, you don't really own it; it owns you. And you're a tenant, and your job is to take care of it and appreciate it. But I also wanted it to be energy efficient. And so when we moved in, on a prior home, we had already done photovoltaics once, and so that was easy. I uh, called the same company, and they put a 6 kW system on the south-facing roof of this 1790s farmhouse. Um, and as you know, NYSERDA supports people getting energy audits, so I also promptly scheduled an energy audit and started learning about the house. And the low-hanging fruit is always conservation. So there were air leaks to take care of, and a couple windows that were for which the storm windows were not adequate, and so some upgrades of windows. A lot of little patches of insulation here and there, and so um, after a period of time, I was ready for another energy audit, and we kind of tested how I'd done. Many of the corrections I'd done myself, and some of them we'd gotten help with. Um, and we, at some point, then put on solar hot water, which was uh, which worked for a while, but kept getting airlocked, and so it was more trouble than it was worth. And so then, as our energy demands shifted, and as I realized I just wanted to go a different direction, we put in another unit of photovoltaics. So now we're up to a 10 kW system between the first and the second set, and we've put in a hybrid electric hot water heater. So our hot water is now generated by the roof, so to speak. Um, Another area of interest for me was paints, and there's a thermal paint available on the market called ThermoShield, and I love the product. We've painted the exterior of the house with ThermoShield. We've painted the south-facing roof with ThermoShield. Um, and the benefit is that there are two benefits. One is uh, function. It is, I think of it as Gore-Tex. It allows humidity to go through it. So for a 1790s farmhouse that doesn't have a vapor barrier in most places, moisture does go through the walls, and moisture classically in old houses pops the paint off. ThermoShield lets the moisture go through, and so I have 15-year-old paint now on the house, and it doesn't peel anywhere. And this summer, I've been spending some time just touching up some places that when they scraped off the old paint, they didn't scrape it all off. And then a couple of those places, it's been peeling. So now I'm finishing that off and finishing it off with ThermoShield. So paint it once with ThermoShield and you probably never paint again, which I like. And secondly, you know how hot the exterior of a house gets on a sunny day. But ThermoShield has micro beads of ceramic in them, porous, hollow ceramic beads. And when it's 95 degrees out, you can put your hand on the roof, you can put your hand on the wall, and it's within 5 degrees of ambient temperature. So
Wow.
the house is not gaining that heat in summer, and so the house is much cooler in the summer, and that reduces the AC load tremendously. Um, and as a ceramic, we don't need this particularly in the Northeast, but houses painted with thermoshield out west tend to survive fires because it is in fact a small insulating layer, and it cinders and other things will land on it, and the house won't burn. So that's a third advantage. It's just not one that I thankfully seem to need in this location. So we got the thermoshield, we got the photovoltaics, we got the thermal hot water, um, and then I'd been really keeping an eye on geothermal as a heating and cooling technology, and this house has a duct system, which is the most efficient for conversion for geothermal because you just swap in the water furnace unit in the basement, and then the heating or the cooling can be distributed through the ducts. So we had done, by this point, we'd done 3 energy audits over time, each time working down our energy demand by making the house more efficient. And at that point, it made sense to me to look at geothermal because, as you know, the most cost-effective energy solution is not to need it. So efficiency and conservation is your first tool, but at some point you've worked it down to kind of a bare minimum, and at that point I was ready to do geo. So this last fall we put in a geothermal system. We got one 500-foot well, and I'd been trying to work it down to where demand was going to only need 1 well rather than 2. It's a closed loop system. It has a twister loop system in it, which very efficiently transmits heat in and out of the ground through the twisted tubes and back to the water furnace system. And we've now been through, we're coming up on a year now, and I'm delighted. The electrical components are simple. Even in January and February of last year, our daily electrical equivalent cost was less than $2 a day to heat the house. And of course, in fact, I'm not paying for it at all in a sense because our photovoltaics are taking care of it, but it's useful to understand what the energy conservation value is. In summer, this past summer, we've had some very hot days, and the energy equivalent cost of the air conditioning was about 75 cents a day to cool the house. So geo is just unbelievably efficient. There's an upfront investment, but if you can work it down to 1 well, and if you're willing to finance it or whatnot, it's about a 8 to 10 year return on investment. And there's no furnace now to do an annual cleaning of. There's no oil tank in my basement anymore. And our photovoltaic system is generating enough power for the geo, for the hot water, for our electrical use. And then I've been fascinated with electric cars, but I always have concern about reliability and servicing. And so I've been keeping an eye on 2017 Chevy Bolt because I knew that somebody would drive it for 2 years and work off about half its value, and then I could get a used one at a reasonable price. So we now have a Chevy Bolt, 100% electric car, over 200-mile range. And when you buy used, you can get one for the price of a Honda Civic, and that was my price point. We just drove it recently to Ithaca and back. That was fine. We drove out there on 1 charge. We found a charger out in Ithaca, souped it back up, and drove home. I will tell you, once you've driven an electric car, you'll never go back. The power is just right there at your foot. It's silent. It doesn't need oil changes, doesn't need a transmission serviced. It doesn't need pretty much anything. And when you can take it home and plug it into a level 2 charger, which we had installed at the house, It charges back up in about 5 hours, and you've done it with the electricity generator on your roof. Um, so I'm probably going to need another 2 or 3 kW electric PV capacity to cover all of that. Because when we last upgraded, I was thinking we would do either geo or electric car, but I didn't think we would spring for both as quickly as we did. So I need a little more photovoltaic, but I have a little more roof. My last patch of roof will go to the last patch of necessary PV generation. So, and then there's the simple stuff. Put in a sun tube in our bathroom this summer, and the sun tube is like a mini round skylight, but it brings sunlight blasting into a room. In fact, more efficiently than a skylight because it's smaller and more compact, and it brings sunlight in, and now I can walk into that room and I don't need to hit the light switch. It's just natural daylight bathing that room coming through a Velux sun tube. So that's, you can get into the technology of the electric cars and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, don't forget the things like a sun tube or LED light bulbs. Or the other thing that I do is we hang our laundry outside. One of the more inefficient pieces of equipment out there is your laundry dryer. It's basically just a heating coil, and I don't care to use that. So we hang our laundry outside, and we let the sun directly dry our clothes. So anyway, those are some things.
That's great. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, it's amazing. So first, how big is your house again? How many square feet about?
We're just under 1,800 square feet.
So about an 1,800 square foot house, built in the 1790s. And what you did is you did efficiency in terms of sealing up all the air leaks by yourself. You did some windows and the leaky windows that were there. You then took that to a next step and you got this thermo-seal paint.
Thermo-shield.
Thermo-shield paint that you put on the whole outside of the house that keeps it kind of tight but lets the water vapor come in and out, which is incredible. You then did the solar, enough solar to both supply all your electricity, because you also did your energy efficient lighting with LED lights that last 10 times longer and produce mostly light instead of heat, which is what an incandescent bulb does. And then you swapped out your oil system for a geothermal heating and cooling system, which took out the combustion. So now you don't even need a carbon monoxide detector in your house anymore because you got no combustibles, which is pretty incredible. No oil tank in the basement, no smelly stuff, no maintenance to do that. Your geo supplies your heating and cooling. Your solar supplies your heating and cooling for the electricity for your heating and cooling with the geo, and now you've got an electric car. So pretty much you've wiped out 90%, 98% of your carbon greenhouse gas footprints. I got that right?
Yeah, the only gas-powered implements on the property now are a generator for when the power goes out, our lawnmower, and a chainsaw.
There you go. So next steps, huh?
Next step is storage, and get rid of that that generator. Yep.
There you go. And eventually the electric mowers are coming a long way too. So they're still a little pricey, but they go a lot further, and they are definitely doing the trick. And a lot of municipalities are looking at using them for a bunch of different reasons, not the least of which is when you take a look at the total cost of ownership and you have a lot of area to maintain, they actually add up pretty quickly in terms of the electric supply. So that's great. What kind of incentives did you get all along the way, Russell? I mean, it seems like you got some was it pretty much all your systems?
Virtually every system came with a combination of state and federal, and sometimes even some local support. For example, the hybrid hot water heater, I think, comes both from the state or from Central Hudson. I don't remember which. The geothermal has both a state component and a federal component in terms of rebate at the state level and tax credit at the federal level. The photovoltaic systems have both state and federal support. I don't remember what the latest version is. The photovoltaics are always being tweaked because, as they should be, in my opinion, because as the manufacturing and installation prices have come down, which is what you like to see, there has been a need there's been less and less need for those incentives. And so they are periodically retracted as the price of the actual installation and manufacturing comes down. So having done now 3 photovoltaic investments over 15 years, each one, the ROI, the return on investment, has been about the same, but the incentives have been adjusted as the raw price has come down on a per kilowatt hour installed basis.
Yeah, so there's depending upon the utility, depending upon which state you're in, there are cash grants that are available for solar electrics, for geothermal, or sometimes for even electric vehicles. And then there are tax credits, federal tax credits, pretty much on all three. And then on state level, sometimes state tax credits too, which is great. And then yeah, there's other local incentives sometimes, whether it's the utility or sometimes the municipalities provide some additional benefits in various ways, shapes, or forms. So that's great. So you said that your payback on your geo system was somewhere between 8 and 10 years, and I don't know if you calculated in your air conditioning savings into that return on investment too. But overall, in terms of your energy systems, I mean, do you think that that's kind of what your return was, 8 to 10 years, which would be somewhere over a 10% return on your investment, or?
I will admit to not having studied it too closely. It 8 to 10 is what they tell you when you're talking to the people who market the products. I am very aware that if the price of energy falls in this country for various reasons, the payback period will be pushed out. And if the price of energy skyrockets for other possible reasons, the rate of return will be more, 5 to 7 years. If gasoline goes back to $4 a gallon, suddenly all these investments look absolutely brilliant. And if gas, falls, stays in the low twos, it's probably more like 12 to 14 years. And so it's just hard to gauge these things. But it's somewhere in that window. And I know that the people who put the incentives together try to find that sweet spot where it's plausible and reasonable, but there's always some uncertainty, and it is an investment. I could have put that same money into a 401k, for example, but there's also uncertainty with a 401k, so I'm perfectly willing to put some of it into these kind of investments that have a payback somewhere between 7 and 12 years, depending on what happens in the market.
Yeah, and then you take a look at some of the additional benefits that come there too. So first, thank you for that excellent explanation and your goal, which is still around a 10% return on investment. Which
Correct.
most people in the market, that's not too shabby.
That's
A
fine.
consistent 10% return on your investment. And then there's all the additional benefits of not having the maintenance worries, not having to have the issues. So for instance, when the polar vortex hit, people who had propane found that they couldn't get it sometimes. There were
Correct.
literally people that wound up having to get electric heaters on an emergency basis to put into their house because they had no ability to heat because they couldn't get that supply. So there's the resiliency benefits, there's the environmental benefits, there's the maintenance benefits, and you add it all together, and the financial piece comes in. And when you take a look, and depending again on your state, your cost of energy, and what you believe is going to happen with energy tomorrow, it becomes a pretty reasonable investment. So thank you so much for that. So what kind of challenges did you run across, and what would you do differently if you did it again?
We haven't had I haven't had too many regrets. Um, I told you we backtracked on hot water, um, but everything else has been straight ahead and no regrets. One of the things that always, in my business, we talk about leading edge, bleeding edge, early adopter, and I'm always conscious that I would like a technology to have been around long enough that when it needs servicing, there's somebody to call. So I don't want to be the first one on the block, but I'm happy to be among the first 10, and so to speak. And so that's been a concern. Photovoltaics, there are enough people who, if something were to happen with our system, there's somebody to call. And I like dealing with or working with companies that have a a track record of service and operation over time. And the same thing is true with geo. There are some kind of novelty technologies on the market right now with geothermal, but I really wanted the water furnace unit in my basement because they've been around for quite a while now. They have reputable service people if they're needed, and they have a track record. I liked the I liked the Chevy Bolt because they were brought onto the market in 2017. I had a chance to watch them for 2 years, read the reviews, talk to the people who owned them, and realize that people love them. And you know, they can list very quickly for you the two or three things they don't like, and those were not things that bothered me. In fact, I didn't find them to be a problem at all, so I'm absolutely delighted with my Chevy Bolt, and I do like the fact that I can drive down to the Chevy dealership and get it serviced, which is not necessarily the same for other electric cars on the market.
Yeah,
So
it's one of the
yeah,
that's a
so
good.
that's kind of what draws me in at a certain point. Um, to each of these technologies and keeps me sort of at the leading edge, but not the bleeding edge.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's one of the potential drawbacks about Tesla is that if you do have a Tesla, it's relatively hard to get it repaired if you hit a deer or have some other kind of mechanical issue associated with it. Doesn't have many issues. You'd have 20 moving parts instead of 2,000, so many fewer things to break down. Most stuff can be repaired with a software upgrade that goes up over the wireless, but if you do happen to have a mechanical issue, it's a lot harder to get it repaired than bringing it to your local dealer. So that's one of the reasons why it's good to have diverse competition out there with every manufacturer having electric vehicles now, which makes it much simpler and easier for that perspective. So, all right. So for you, I think you said it, but why don't we just say again, what's next, Russell?
Well, taking a deep breath wouldn't be bad for me because having done an electric car and a Geo in about a 6 month period was a big step for us. But what's clearly next in terms of the industry, and therefore I'll be watching closely, is storage. Because although my carbon footprint is on an annual basis net zero and generating basically what we use, every night the sun goes down and every night I do like turning lights on. And so, although I'm putting electrons back into the system during the day, I am forcing the combustion of, I'm forcing the generation of electricity in the evening. And if I had storage, uh, then I could generate electrons during the day and put them in my battery and use them in the evening. So storage is the big leveler in terms of equalizing demand and supply, and you can do that a bunch of different ways. You can either, but I think the technology that really fascinates me is the bidirectional batteries, which Nissan and a couple other car manufacturers are looking at. Um, where if I've got a fully charged car, um, why should I have another battery in my basement? Why shouldn't I use my car as part of my storage system? Um, and so, and the dedicated basement storage batteries right now are pretty darn pricey. And I'd rather drive it around during the day rather than have it sit there doing nothing. So I think that for me, the next thing is going to be our next electric car, so to speak, because my wife and I both drive, and I drive a Honda Civic with about 160,000 miles on it. So my eyes are open. There will be a change at some point. I love my Civic. It's a wonderful Civic. And in fact, as internal combustion vehicles go, it's incredibly efficient because it's a four-cylinder, easy to manufacture, easy to service car relative to other IC cars as opposed to EV cars. It's very, very low carbon footprint, but it burns gas. And so my next EV is probably going to have a bidirectional battery, and that will help us level out what happens with our PV system.
Yeah,
So,
Yep, you're exactly right, and I think that's going to be a really fascinating future because right now Nissan and the Leaf is the one that is bidirectional, and next year the software and the hardware package is coming out, so people can hook their Nissan Leaf up to their house, charge it normally, drive it normally, but then if the electricity goes out, there's enough power in that Leaf battery to carry most people's houses for 5 days.
Exactly.
Yours is probably even a little longer, given everything else that you've got, that you've
And then
already
I could
done. So,
retire that generator.
and then you could get rid of your generator, yeah, which
That's
would be great.
exactly right.
Yeah, it's an
Well,
amazing thing.
and I'm told that hidden in the Tesla 3 is a bidirectional switch, and they're getting ready to roll it out, but they haven't rolled out the software yet. So it may be a hidden gem in the Tesla, although I have the same concerns about the Tesla that you just reviewed a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, the only problem is if you have to get them repaired, is what does that
Correct.
take? So,
Yep.
a great car. I mean, definitely, no doubt about it. Tesla pushed everybody else to get into this market, so it's fantastic. They led the way that way, but I think there's a couple of Achilles heels that they got to watch out for. So, okay, that's great. You good to go on for a while? We'll do the extended version, or do you need to go?
Sure.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So, okay, so what do you think is one thing that most people, when they're looking at clean energy for either home or work, that one unique thing that you don't think most people realize?
Well, I wrote down some notes here. I mean, I think that the thing that most people don't realize is that their cheapest energy is the energy they don't use. And people don't think that through. They're just like, oh, well, how am I going to pay less on my electric bill, or how am I going to buy less gas? But you know, the real question is, how do I use less, and how do I change my implements or change my activities, change my lifestyle, so that I simply use less. So to me, that's always the place to start. And the other thing that most people don't know is that they can get a free NYSERDA energy audit on their house. And you can get one every 2 years. You're wasting your time if you don't change anything. But if you take some steps, and then I recommend calling a different person if you do it more than once, because each person who comes in has their own skill set and interests, and so I have learned different things from the different people who I've had as energy audits over the years. So that's my answer to your question.
That's fantastic. Cheapest energy is the one that you don't use. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Efficiency first. So it makes total sense. And in New York State, in most parts of New York State, you can get a free energy audit. Other places, utilities do it. Sometimes you got to pay a little bit for it, but in any case, it's a great thing to do, and great suggestion that you get different contractors looking at it, because each one's got their own perspective about what's the best thing to do and what's their expertise. Outstanding. So if you had to say worst clean energy or environmental moment, either in your house development or in your career, what was it, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I think the worst moments are the ones where you have you've put a lot of emotion and dollars into some clean technology investment in the house, and then something doesn't quite work right, and you just wonder whether you've made a mistake, because the the numbers of repair people available are limited, and you just wonder if you're a fool. And thankfully, that has not been an issue for photovoltaics. They've just behaved flawlessly on the roof. But I have my moments every once in a while saying, every one of those panels is screwed through my roof shingles, through into my roof members. Am I going to regret someday that, roof leak or something of that nature? Um, and so I think there's just the concern about repair, and who and new technologies introduce the unexpected foibles, and so I'm not sure I have a worst clean energy moment, but it's the part of the whole thing that gives me pause. It's safer and easier to buy the bad old car, or buy the old furnace or something of that nature, because 100 people know how to repair them, and we've had 50 years of experience with them, or 100 years of experience with them. Um, New things bring new challenges, and who are you going to call, I guess, is the question.
Who are you going to call? Yeah, and one of the things that I always recommend to people is always get three different bids and different perspectives on things, because make sure that you do your due diligence, make sure you're getting somebody that's reputable, check their references, make sure you can trust them, because maybe the greatest system out there, but if they install it wrong, you're going to have major problems, especially if it's on your roof with the solar system or whatever else. So
Yep.
great advice. Thank you very much. All right, you have a particular aha kind of moment where you realize something that was like, oh yeah, and tell us about that, please.
Well, one aha was that I realized I could buy a used electric vehicle. The sticker price on the new ones is more than I will pay for an electric car. Um, so I was watching them, and I just like, well, that's interesting, but forget it. And really, an aha moment was to realize, well, they've now been on the road long enough. I can get a used one, and used one with less than 30,000 miles on it. Uh, what the heck? From my perspective, it's as good as new. And the price came into my window. So that was one aha. Another aha, and it has really made it difficult for me to drive my Civic, is an awareness of just sort of the conversion of gasoline to carbon dioxide, and realizing that every time I have that gas motor running, I'm putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And it's not it's an optional activity. I can turn the key, and I shouldn't drive that car. But just kind of the burden of understanding that any one of us and every one of us who is uh, conducting an activity that necessitates the combustion of fossil fuels, and I'm a geologist, I know how those fossil fuels got there. Um, and I know from the historic record what our atmosphere used to look like before that carbon dioxide was was hidden, in a sense, in coal deposits and gasoline deposits, and now we're putting them back into the atmosphere. It's a psychic burden on me that is a reverse of an aha. It's a pain moment, when I'm burning gas. Um, and I guess the last one, aha moment, was realizing that we could get into geo, by because we were right on the edge of one well or two wells. And when I discovered the twister loop technology that gets more heating and cooling capacity out of a per foot of drilled well string, that's what did it. It brought it into the price window, and we could do geo with one well. And So those were some aha moments for me.
Those are fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it is incredible that all of us don't realize that on the average, driving our vehicles, 5 tons of CO2 per year, heating our homes, 5 tons of CO2 per year, and then electricity, depending on the state, is somewhere between 2 to 7 tons, depending upon your state and your electricity mix. Here in New York, it's a little more than two. So just everything that we do every day, we're just emitting carbon dioxide, and we're all part of it. There's 7 billion of us on this planet now, and we're reaching saturation point. And we have to make this transition. And the question is just, how can we do it? And I think you're a great example of how do you do it in a very frugal way of doing what you can yourself, checking things out, doing it scientifically. You're a scientist, so hey, no surprise there. But the reality is that we can all do various different things ourselves, and then just being smart about how you go about doing things, and whatever your range of activity and options are to maximize that benefit. So great stuff, Russell. Thank you so much. All right, Pulsar round. Here we go. Short, succinct, amazing, and mind-blowing answers, if you would, sir. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Conserve energy.
Conserve energy?
Yep.
Excellent. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Hang out your laundry.
Love that one. We live in a sea of energy, was what Dennis Hayes, the original organizer of Earth Day, said, and it's so true. It takes the same amount of energy to dry whatever we're drying outside as it does inside, except you don't pay for it outside. It's free. Wonderful
Right.
advice. Share an internet resource for folks to listen in.
That I don't have for you. But I have had a concern that all of the things that we do here at our 1790s farmhouse is in a sense selfish. We're doing it only to ourselves and for ourselves. But what I am always happy to do, and talking with you today is part of that, is being an advocate. Catch me at a dinner party or talking with friends. I'm constantly talking with friends about all these things, and I can point now to many of them who have moved to photovoltaics or have painted their house with thermoshield or have put in a hybrid hot water heater. So kind of the missionary zeal is my outreach.
Outstanding.
Yep.
And they say, when you take a look in particular at solar electric and photovoltaics, the reason why people do solar electric photovoltaics isn't because they're more wealthier, isn't because they're better educated. It's because somebody they knew did it, and that's the main reason why people shift, is because they found someone that convinced them that, oh, this is a good idea.
Correct.
They did it. I can do it too. So great stuff, Russell, and hopefully this show will be one other way that you can help spread the word, which would be wonderful.
So it's not an internet resource, but it's a advocacy outreach resource.
Yeah, and it's sharing what you know with folks, which is
Yep.
wonderful. Okay, book that you'd recommend.
Paul Hawkins' Drawdown.
Outstanding.
It's not a readable book because it's more like an encyclopedia of tactics, but each page or each open book page, picture and text describes yet another tactic that can be deployed to conserve energy and slow climate change. And the menu of options is mind-boggling and, in fact, unexpected. I don't know if you're familiar with the book,
Yeah.
but everything from realizing the climate and sustainability benefits of family planning or education or low head hydro or you know, food production efficiency, all kinds of things that are on a scale that are quite different from putting photovoltaics on your roof.
Yeah, there's just a massive amount of opportunities out there, and the thing though is that for everybody to start where they are, everyone's on the spectrum. None of us are perfect. Don't throw stones at people, but figure out where you are, what you could take. What's a step for us, one
Yep.
by one by one, and then as a society and a civilization, there's all these options and all these things that we can do and need to do, and hopefully will.
Yep.
Wonderful. All right, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing for everyone in the world, what would it be?
That's pretty easy for me. It's a universal basic income and it's climate stabilization.
Ah.
I picked two.
Nice too, huh? Universal basic income and climate stabilization. Fantastic. All right. Weather time fudge or weather time fun? A weather event, extreme weather event that you lived through and tell the tale, or the most fun you ever had, and what was the weather when you did it? WTF or F?
Well, the reason we came to the Hudson Valley was to work on an apple orchard in the town of Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I were living in Washington, D.C. We had closed out the rent, turned in the key, loaded the car with all of our meager possessions. We'd been married 1 year. We had tucked the cat in the back seat, and we were ready to head north. And we got a phone call from the farm we were scheduled to go and live at saying, "We've just had a terrible snowstorm. You can't come right now." That was Snowleaf of 1987. It was an unexpected October snowstorm that basically shut down Dutchess County for almost 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I said to the farm family, I said, "What am I supposed to do?" And they said, "I don't know, but we have no plumbing, we have no electricity. There are limbs down everywhere. There's no point coming right now." And we had turned in our key and paid our last rent, and so we were stranded. So I called my uncle and aunt who live in Wilmington, Delaware, and they were pretty surprised to hear from me. And they kindly let us hang out with them for 1 week.
Oh.
Our little cat ran around their house kind of to their consternation, and they really hadn't spent as much time with their nephew and wife ever. So we all got to know each other, and they were very
Oh,
gracious. And then we made our way up to the Hudson Valley, and they had just returned power, but things were still pretty rough here. And it was our introduction to the Hudson Valley.
hey, newlyweds. Honeymoon's over, huh? That's a great story. Well, that's wonderful.
Yep.
Boy, I hope you had invited your uncle and aunt to the wedding.
Oh yes.
That's
Oh
good. So
yes.
that was good. So it wasn't
No, they
totally out
they
of the
they
blue.
were good. It's just, we hadn't seen them often, and certainly not for a whole week of living in their house unexpectedly.
Oh, yeah, very gracious of them. Very wonderful. But oh my gosh,
Wonderful.
that's great. Okay, well, what's the one thing you're most energized about today?
You're going to limit me to one. Um, I, One topic that I find fascinating is what to do with under unused dams across the Hudson Valley. There is an appropriate and good contingency that says let's take them out so that the streams can run wild, and back as they should be without barriers to fish and other mobile creatures. And there's another opportunity that says low head hydro is an undeveloped opportunity to generate a little more electricity. A 6 foot dam with water flowing over it can provide power to 15 or 20 homes. And it's not as flashy as a wind farm or a solar field or whatnot, but it's there. And so there's some people exploring that, and I find that fascinating. And then kind of with my environmental head, for dams that are not suitable for that, or for which there's not the right mix isn't there, then let's take the dam out. So doing something with these thousands of dams across the Hudson Valley, I find fascinating and excites me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, you can have another one if you want.
Oh, the other ones just have to do with the work that I love doing, water resource planning and wells. When I get a call from a client who says I need this or I want to do that, it just makes me smile.
That's great.
It doesn't just pay my rent here, which I appreciate, I mean, or mortgage, but um, it's what I love, and I'm happy to do the work that I do.
Yeah, it's great that you got your passion as your work, man.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, parting piece of advice that you'd give to people and the best way for them to connect with you if you want them to.
Well, the grand finale, so to speak, is to insert here a phrase that has disturbed some of my friends, but I stick with it, which is climate change is is making a lot of things change, and one of them is weather patterns. And so here we are in the American Northeast. In the Hudson Valley, we have historically gotten something in the order of 40 inches of rain annually. Climate change suggests we're going to get that or more in the future. And here in the Hudson Valley, if you're north of approximately Poughkeepsie, you also have the giant funnel of the Hudson River and the Mohawk River bringing fresh water past the Hudson Valley as an additional resource. So we have water coming at us from the entire state of New York via the Hudson. We have rainfall, and we have climate predictions suggesting that we're going to have the same or more rain in the future. I would argue that we are in a position that you could call the Saudi Arabia of water. And that doesn't mean you can't locally overtax it, but in general, if we can't figure it out here, what the heck are we doing wrong? Because we're in a water-rich area with the prospects of remaining a water-rich area on a planet for which water resources are in many places scarce and in some places becoming more scarce. And so this is an exciting place to be. It's also a responsibility, as well as an opportunity. And that's my parting shot here. And to do that all with an eye towards sustainability and energy efficiency is why I keep my shoulder to the wheel.
Russell UrbanMead, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your advice, and any last thing that we didn't cover that you'd like to say.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with you, Ron.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and have a great day.